Philomythia podcast.
All right.
Oh, wow, that peaked the shit on mine.
That's fine. It's not, no claps will be heard in the actual episode. No claps were harmed in the
No
making
claps,
of this content. Yep. We're not going to give our audience the clap.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah.
That is good.
First episode. Woo!
Whee! I wish I had a beverage.
I have cold brew. It's pretty tasty.
Is that what you're sipping on?
Yeah, so I need to go shopping, but I was prepping for this episode, so I'm like, I'll do that after. So there's a coffee shop around the corner, but I like the Trader Joe's cold brew more than this cold brew. Like this one's kind of like has a weird after bite. It's not smooth. I'm like, Trader Joe's does it better. It's funny, but it's good enough. It's definitely got lots of caffeine, so that was kind of the point. So,
Well, that's good because you're gonna need it now.
yeah, I'm gonna need it. So, first episode. What are we doing here, Ian Luth? What are we doing?
Oh, you used my full name. Why would you do
I did.
that?
I outed you. I doxed you. Everyone find him and send him treasures.
Don't send me anything.
Send him lots of dice.
We're doing a podcast that we probably started technically a long time ago, but now it's this.
Yeah, I think this is like the phoenix burning up, and this is the thing that rises out of the ashes from
Right.
the other podcast. So that it's like
Exactly.
the baby or the new generation for sure.
Sweet.
So I think we have a lot of conversations about D&D. So we're like, hey, why don't we record it and do a podcast?
Yeah. Well, and we also talk a lot about stories and
Stories, yeah. Pop
Things-
culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
good
yeah.
things, and I'm usually the one that likes most stuff. You're a little bit more discerning than me.
Yeah, discerning is a nice way to put it. Or pretentious or whatever you want to say. I'm more opinionated, however you want to take that.
Yeah, it's
Ian's just like, I just like it. I'm like, it was terrible. There's 3 points. Horrible. I wanted
I
to
would
throw
never
up.
watch it again. Or I've watched it 3 times already. It was pretty good.
Horrible. Yeah, so that's fine. It'll balance out. It's
Right.
good
It's gonna be
views.
good.
So I guess I should explain the title of the podcast. It's a word I made up. It doesn't exist outside of my brain and now on this podcast. But Philomythia or Philomyth is just like philosopher, but for stories instead of wisdom. So it's just like if you're obsessed with stories, I kind of feel like that's what a DM or a dungeon master is they're kind of obsessed with maybe worlds too, like building worlds, building situations, building stories, and kind of
Oh, God, I
at
love
least
it.
if you're a good DM, I think you're kind of thinking, how can I like give my players the most payoff when I'm building sessions? How can I make this the coolest thing for them? Whether it works or not, it's different. But you're kind of at least for my money, you're obsessed and thinking about it, even if it doesn't ever work out that way, which I don't think it ever does. So one thing I was thinking of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was about to start a conversation. We're still talking about the beginning of this, so go on.
We're just talking, man. You can go. I was going to bring up another point, but
I was going to
forgot,
say
so.
you when you're a DM, or at least for me as a DM, I jumped in by creating a homebrew right away that had these lofty, crazy ideas of doing all sorts of stuff and having these really cool, powerful characters. And right from the get-go, everything changed because how I pictured what they were going to do
right,
versus what everyone did was
different.
so different. So different. So I had this,
Just a little
I guess
bit.
this is like one of those things that we would talk about, those 3 kind of the 3 points of the creating that story or being a DM, where you create something that's shared like that.
Right.
There's the first part of it that you kind of brew up in your head and you're like, ooh, this is what I've got for the story.
Right.
And then there's when you present it to them and they interact with it. And
Right.
that changes everything about what the story was.
Totally.
And then, after that is how people talk about the story. Like you say, like how people refer to it, how the story is told after it's done, even
Right.
changes it a little bit more.
Oh,
And
yeah. I would say so, for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy to me how, just a few months ago, how I started thinking of the campaign to where it's going. It's just interesting that emergent play of people influencing what you're creating. It's
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've talked about this, just you and me, not being recorded that I know of, but maybe the CIA was listening. I don't know.
they're always listening,
They're always listening.
tracking everything.
I kind of heard that about filmmaking, was that a film is made 3 times, where the first is your pre-production, where you're building like concept art, if it's like a, big budget sci-fi movie, let's say, and doing all the planning and all that kind of stuff. And then you have production, and you bring everybody else in, and it can totally change your movie completely. And then there's a third time when you edit what you've made and you make it make sense. And I kind of feel like that's exactly what D&D is. You have the DM kind of plotting all this stuff and making random tables and setting up maps, and if you're on Roll20 or a VTT, getting all your stuff prepped, and then the players come in and just totally ruin all your plans as a DM. just piss on it and light it on fire, and you're like, well, I didn't plan for that, so
They light it on fire, and then they grab onto things that were inane and stupid, and you literally
innocuous
threw it out there right at that moment, and
Yeah,
they latch
yeah.
onto it like it's fucking scripture.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have how you talk about it afterwards, and that's kind of the editing. It's like you're putting all of this into a kind of more narrative form where, when you're on the table, you're stopping, you're looking up rules, you're arguing points, you're being like, can you do that? Will you post that in the chat? Like, can you really do it? Yes, it's right here. It's written in the book, that kind of stuff. That gets edited out, no pun intended, in the third phase. It just becomes a story that your characters went on, And so I think that's a good analogy for the different modes of play as a DM, is that each phase is kind of this different game almost.
Yeah.
And it's okay that it's that way. And I guess we should say at not the outset, but, at this point, we're not super veteran DMs.
Oh,
We're both,
Not at all.
within our first year. I think I just had my anniversary for my 1-year anniversary for the game I started. But we've been involved in D&D for a long time. Like, we were around for AD&D, and I played third edition a little bit, and that kind of thing. I wanted to play fourth. I actually bought some of the books, but I never did. The much maligned, controversial edition.
I don't know anything about 4th edition. Well, after D&D, like AD&D or 2nd edition, I started getting into different games. Like, I really got into Warhammer 40K and Warhammer Fantasy, the battle stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't mess around with too much of that while that was going on. And then some card games,
Right. Well, there's like Spellfire was around, and I played a fair amount of Magic the Gathering as well.
Yeah, I played that like a teeny bit with you.
Yeah. Magic the Gathering, like those, Spellfire I think is fun, but for me, Magic the Gathering does not hold interest. Like, I can play it for about a couple weeks, and then I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else.
Right.
Because I'm not into just the repetitive strategy. Not that that's not fun. People obviously love it, but just for me.
If this ever gets listened to, the world is hating you right now because of how
I know the warriors are going to their keyboards. It's fine.
Right. Oh, yeah.
If people are listening to us, it means that things are going well. So I'll take the shot.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I always loved the idea of playing Magic the Gathering, and then I played it, and I suck at it, and Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard
yeah.
they've changed a lot of the rules though in the past.
Well, and they've added stuff onto it, and like
Right.
for instance, the Dungeons and Dragons add-on, they have little dungeons that you go through and stuff. Like there's different mechanics with each expansion, and
What?
yeah, it's weird. Like I'm down to play it, but I feel like being good at Magic's kind of like learning an instrument. Like you got to do that shit all the time and know the cards and have your different decks, and it's like I don't want to do that over and over. I'd rather like play piano.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. There's video games I really want to play.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's
got to pick your battles.
Gotta pick that stuff when your time is what time is.
Yeah. So I think this podcast is kind of us learning how to be better DMs too. Like we're talking about stuff and, trying to get a different perspective on things, but also like us learning and becoming better.
And whoever's listening, maybe you want an inside look to what that's like to be a DM without actually doing it, or maybe you're doing it too, and maybe you're a player that's got aspirations too, and you hear us talk about it. And like Eric has always said, I've known Eric for a long time. We've been friends for
aeons.
Yeah, like 20 plus years. Eric was always like, the best way to learn something is just to start doing it, man. You just jump in, start doing it, you'll learn, and just keep learning. And so I just jumped into being a DM. I'd been like, tried to do a little bit of it when we were much younger, but it just wasn't, it didn't land very well. And it was inconsistent playing.
And I think it was harder back then to know what being a DM or GM, if you prefer, like what that was, where now you can actually look up videos of people being a DM and like, oh, that's what you do. You know?
Yeah. Well,
I think, go ahead.
No, you're.
I think too, this is a good podcast for people who maybe want to know, okay, what does that look like? Like, what does it mean to plan a session? Or like, what are you actually doing? Not just, you hear a lot of kind of generalities like when you plan, also do this, but it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? I remember when I was, because Ian and I are both, my name is Eric, by the way. I don't think I've said my name, and that's Ian. We're both musicians. We played for multiple decades. We'll just say that, for a long time. I know when I started playing bass, electric bass, I didn't even know what practicing was. It took me years to be like, I don't know what that means. Like, you need to practice. Okay, well, what is that? What am I sitting down and doing? And I feel like DMing can be the same way, where you're like, okay, well, I want to do it, but I don't even know what are the things, to do. Right. So I think we can kind of talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
And
well, I mean,
I'm still figuring that out, too.
Right. Well, I mean, even reading, like, you just pick up the Dungeon Master guide and you're like, I'm just going to read this. And you do. And by the end, you're like, okay, that was a lot of words.
Yeah.
And I still am not sure.
Right.
How, like, I get how, but how?
Right. What's the actual procedure for, like, if you're sitting down and planning, or if you want to do this, like, okay, what's step one? If I know nothing about this, what do I do here? Okay, what's the next step? Those kind of things,
Right.
And some of that, I think, is just like, well, you just got to plan a bunch and you start finding, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, that works really well. Oh, I should always do this first. That kind of thing.
Right.
So
find out, like, what you get hung up on.
Yeah. Like, I tend to find I plan much better if I find some art. If I'm like, okay, I'm thinking this is going to happen, and I look up something visual that stimulates me, I can usually get a clearer picture of what I actually want to have happen.
Oh,
which
nice.
is weird. I never thought of it that way, but the more I've had to look at, like, art and stuff as a DM, that's definitely helped me. So
that's cool.
But as we go along, we're not going to get into anything specific today, I don't think.
No.
So I think we both talked about this, and we think of D&D and tabletop RPGs as emergent play. Like that's kind of the difference between, say, a tabletop RPG and playing like, Legend of Zelda or something, which is also an RPG, but it's different. And I actually looked up the definition. This is from Wikipedia of what emergence is, like what it means in terms of like, oh, that's an emergent science, for instance, or that's emergent gameplay. And this is the definition I had in Wikipedia, so it's completely legit. It's from Wikipedia.
No one. That's only.
Do not question me. I have my quotes.
Only the most scientific and knowledgeable post things in Wikipedia.
They know knowledge. They know knowledge. They're knowledged up. So this is the definition. It says, in philosophy, systems theory, science, and art, emergence occurs when an entity is observed to have properties its parts do not have on their own. So a lot of small things like a brain cell, for instance, does not have the properties of intelligence like billions of brain cells, which make a brain, have. So that's kind of what it's saying, is like a little dumb thing, a small thing. When you put a bunch of them together, you get these other behaviors. And you can do the same thing. They've done studies on like cities, how cities act if you treat it like an entity.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Certain patterns emerge. And then it says they don't have their own properties or behaviors which emerge only when the parts interact in a wider whole. And I think that's, for me, that's been the big discovery with D&D, is it doesn't really come to life until you sit down on the table with your players and you start bouncing up against each other. And where the secret sauce emerges.
Oh, yeah. I think it's so interesting to be a player and a DM, because there's so many different aspects that you learn from doing both.
Right.
And it's fascinating to watch these stories play out. They are, and don't get me wrong, it's Emergent butting up against each other creates friction, and so sometimes there's moments of friction
right
between characters within a game, and it's always interesting to see how those kind of things pan out.
Right.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. I think too you hear a lot of, and again I think some of these, I can't be positive, but I think some of these are like armchair DMs. Like I think a lot of the complaints you hear online about RPGs or D&D, because it's very popular, so you're going to get more complaints, is that like, oh, my players always destroy my plans. And like, oh, they always derail it. But I'm like, I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think that's the point, is your players are going to come in as this chaotic element and make it interesting. Where if you just want everything to be the way you planned it, like write a book. Like, be an author. That's basically what you're doing. There's no reason for the players to be there if they're just going to follow along a track. I'm sure people will disagree with that, but that's...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that there's probably D&D games that feel like that because the DM knows that those players are going to roll with exactly they throw at them. They just know that.
Right.
Then
and there may be... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
And there's... that I'm sure there are games out there that do that naturally.
Right.
Just like there are games out there that the DM plans a specific thing and the players do something else, and you're scrambling to be like, oh, shit.
Right. Well, I think, too, there's probably players who want to be railroaded, for lack of a better term. Like they're like, just give us the track. We want to go through the roller coaster ride, and that's totally legitimate.
Oh yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
If you have fun with that, man, that's great.
Do it.
Love it.
Do it. Keep doing it. Yeah. But I think if you're thinking about getting into DMing, expect that as like a feature. Like you're going to make plans, and you'll use about 10% of it, and the rest will be like, well, I could never have foreseen my players doing that thing.
Yeah.
So now I just have to roll with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And having even a brief understanding of improvisation can really help somebody that wants to be a DM.
Right.
It's a great little skill to have.
Right. I think a lot of improvisation is kind of inoculating yourself to being uncomfortable. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's super uncomfortable. It's really
horrible
not
sometimes.
fun. Yeah. I know, like, for, like, the first, I want to say, like, 6-7 months of DMing, like, this last year, this has always happened, but it's taken me a long time. Like, I'd get really intense anxiety right before the game would start every time. It's like, oh, God, I'm good. Oh, no. It's, like, terrifying. I'd still do it, but it was terrifying.
Oh, yeah. I know the
So-
feeling.
Yeah. So emergent gameplay, and again, this is from Wikipedia as well. This is the emergent gameplay page. It says emergent gameplay refers to complex situations in video games, board games, or tabletop role-playing games that emerge from the interaction of relatively simple game mechanics. So this definition's talking more about like the actual mechanics or rules, bringing out things, which I think is fine for video games, but I think RPGs, you have that human element. You have people actually playing the game, which tends to bring out that emergent quality, I would say.
Right.
So
Well, I think that there's so much that can be different within an RPG with people rather than a game, because a game has limits. People don't have limits, so
right.
And the imagination can roll with anything that you really want it to be. So if they're like, I saw this on a little meme or cartoon where there's people playing D&D. The DM says something like, "Oh, you see the king and the king's guard walking by in the street," and one of the character goes, "Wait, I can see the king?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can see the king." He's like, "I shoot an arrow at him." It's like,
Right.
What? And it's like, "I shoot an arrow at him." It's like, "You said I could do anything I wanted. That's what I do."
Right.
It's like, "Okay, well, roll the d20." Rolls like a 6, and it goes, "Okay, well, the king's guard blocks the arrow, and they charge you down, and here's the attack roll against you. That's 19 damage." And then the guy goes, "Okay, well, it's like, you're not going to do anything. You're dead. That you have 12 hit points. You're dead." And they freak out. And they're like, "You said
Right.
this." It's like, "Well, dude, what are you doing? This isn't."
What are you thinking?
Yeah, this is.
Yeah. You should attack the president of the kingdom.
Yeah, the king. You just shot an arrow at him, missed, and the dude came over and murked you. You're done.
Right.
Like, roll a new character. Like,
Yeah. I'm penalizing you. No resurrection for you. You
Yeah.
have to make a new character.
that was foolish.
Yeah.
That
For
character deserved to die for such a foolish move. Can you imagine if you'd have hit the king with the arrow? Jeez.
Well, it's kind of like that. I can't remember what podcast it was from. It might have been a meme. But talking about how, like, I think it was a meme, some DM talking about one of their players where they were in a village and they were talking to a blacksmith, and then they hit the blacksmith, but they were high enough level that the hit killed the blacksmith.
Oh, yeah. I've
And
heard
then the
about this.
town flipped out. It was like they weren't trying to, it was just a roll of the dice. So, and then they like went to jail and like
For the murder of
just
the
totally
blacksmith.
derailed because like, well, you killed Bill, the blacksmith. Like, he's been there for 20 years. What do you expect? People loved him. Okay. I feel like a lot of times if you're DMing, like, okay, the king's going across the drawbridge, and you plan, okay, they might attack them, they might try to talk to them, they might, you kind of have these decision trees, but then you'll have the one person be like, okay, I want to climb the wall of the castle and then light all the roofs on fire to get the king's attention, and you're like, what? What's happening here?
How is this?
How's this pertinent?
All right, fine.
I could never plan for this kind of thing. It's just totally
Right.
random.
Like, how would you like?
There's
Well,
a lot of
the roofs are made of straw. Well, I guess you could like. All right, roll your dexterity check to get up the wall. Rolls like a nat 1. Well,
You fell
too
into
bad.
the moat. Slip. Ah.
you hit your head on the way down. Take 1d4 bludgeoning,
Yeah.
and I need a Constitution saving throw to make sure you didn't pass out. Oh, you
Finally
did.
get up there. I cast fireball. What?
What? Okay.
You just killed 20 people. What? I just
now
put...
you're wanted by the law. Like, you're in deep trouble.
Yep. They take it as a terrorist act on the kingdom.
There's within games that like we play the Friday game. There's some times where people make choices, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, absolutely.
And then things go down, and I'm like, "How did you expect that to go?" Like, I'll never forget though that one argument about the Giants trap. You remember where it was we were trying to get the portal to open?
Wait, we've had multiple portals, so which portal?
It was the one where we're in the giant temple or whatever, and
right.
our buddy, he goes, maybe we should touch the weapons to the symbols, and I instantly erupt into that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I will never. That's the never. That's the. Why would they do that? That's fucking stupid. I go off.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that was the solution.
That was the solution.
Spoiler alert. We should. So, Ian and I are both PCs in we play every Friday. It's the Storm King's Thunder. So it's one of the official.
Now you just spoiled it because they didn't know
official
what it was.
Published things. Well, I figure people want to know. You know. So spoiler alert. There's a part in a temple. That game is huge. Good luck.
It's so big. It takes forever.
Where there's a thing and you put a thing on a stuff and then you open the door. So
whatever you do, don't cast a magic spell at the portal thing. All right? Don't do that.
Now you're really spoiling it.
Just don't.
Now you're just ruining people's lives. They were going to play this beautiful module and you ruined it.
Beautiful module.
It's not our favorite.
There are some really fun parts to it.
Yeah.
Some really fun parts. And then depending on how you roll, how you do things, it gets kind of draggy.
Yeah. Well,
At least what we're choosing to do.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of stuff we haven't done, a lot of the side stuff.
Yeah.
But I think fighting giants is kind of a boring premise after a while. Like you're just doing, you're fighting a giant thing, and once we're really high level because our DM, in his infinite wisdom, deigned to give us double XP for like the first half of the campaign. So we just we were on PC steroids, just like. We just mowed down everything. So that was the other thing is we got super powerful, super quick.
And he allowed some of us some homebrew, at least me, that homebrew that we found on the internet. It's not homebrew anymore. Now it's actually official, but when
Circle of Stars?
Yeah. When I picked it, it wasn't official yet.
Yeah, it was UA. Yeah.
Yep.
But I'm sure other people enjoy it.
Oh yeah.
It seems like most of these modules, though, like most of the 5th edition stuff, is more about here's the unrefined jewel. Now you got to take this and go polish it and make it really workable for your table, which is good and bad. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's definitely how
Emergent.
How Waterdeep is like. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of the philosophy of 5th edition. Is like if you read through the DMG. It's got some really cool ideas, but it might just spare like one paragraph for it. Like, oh, this is a thing you can do. And we're going to move right past that. Not explain
and we're
anymore.
moving on.
It's like you make it up. Like, all right. I mean, that's cool, but having some examples is nice, you know. Jim Davis from WebDM talks about that a lot. And at first you're like, okay, that seems like a odd complaint, but the more you get into it, you're like, yeah, it'd be nice to have some more stuff, you know, like that. So
right.
Complaints. So we talked about this, Ian. I bet you forgot, but let's start building a campaign world today.
No. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
How do you want to start?
Well, I had another thing because we've talked about this in the past, is making your campaign world dynamic. And it's like, well, what does that mean? What does something being dynamic means? Because you have, words like dynamo, which means power, but I don't really think that's what that we're referring to. So again, I looked it up. This is from
Look at you with all of your.
This is from Google.
things.
Yeah, I told you I have notes.
Do you know?
I
Do
got
you
you.
know what I did today?
What'd you do?
I've been just sitting watching TV waiting for this. This is what I did, and you've been on my.
I got up. Well, I taught a lesson, so that's why when you're like, "Are you done?" I'm like, "No, I just woke up. I'm teaching."
Teaching.
Yeah,
But
doing
you've been
stuff.
like looking up words and stuff. Jeez.
Well, I mean, I didn't spend that much time. I probably I thought about it a bunch before, like a few weeks back, and then I pulled some things that I had already marked, and then I looked up definitions, and it's my thing. So, a dynamic world. So I looked up some definitions from Google, but I think this is from the Cambridge Dictionary. It's one of the fancy dictionaries. I don't remember.
Oh, man,
I closed the tab.
I had a whole
God.
conversation about dictionaries last night.
I'm sure. Yeah, Ian's a little upset right now because he cares so much about dictionaries and words.
Not anymore. Not after that conversation. But we can move forward.
Was it with Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Was he talking about-
he's taken language history classes,
Right.
like English.
He
history
probably talked
classes.
about like how much language has changed. Like,
Not even that. It's like this. There's these. I don't remember what the words are because I'm not thinking about it. But there are these two words that there are these two schools of thought with language and
like how
prescriptive, or prescriptive, and descriptive, and
Yeah. So one is like, this is what language should be. This is the official thing. And the other one's probably like language continually changes.
right.
Like
If
that.
I think it's prescriptive. I could be wrong because again, I
think
don't
it's
know.
proscriptive.
No, I'm
probably.
pretty sure it's prescriptive.
It's prescriptive.
I'm pretty sure, but it's when if I'm talking to you and I'm using verbiage that's not real words, but you understand me, it counts.
Right.
Right. And that's one of the schools of thought. Regardless, this goes into a whole thing about me and dictionaries.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get into that. But you were
That's fine.
about
We don't
to,
have to talk about
you were
it.
about to
Yeah.
talk about something.
So a dynamic world. This is just. I'm going to read. Well, let me read the definition. I do have this tab open. So this is just Google. I just typed in dynamic definition. Literally just Googled it. I thought this was pretty cool because this is how I think about like a dynamic world. So, and this is just the top definition. So, a process or system characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. And then specifically in physics, it's relating to forces producing motion. So again, we have this idea of things moving or movement, right? Linguistics of a verb expressing an action, activity, event, or process. So if you keep reading down, there's always this idea of motion and movement. And so my kind of summing up of this was a dynamic world is constantly in motion, constantly changing and morphing. So whether the players are involved in a certain pocket of the world, that world has a life of its own, which is pretty much just in the DM's head. You're making up stuff that people may never see. So again, it's like you have to be kind of obsessed with this process to really get into it.
Yeah, I'm into it. But like, what do you want to start with this world we're creating? How do you want to do that?
Well, I have a couple ideas.
Okay.
I didn't really know. I was like, I have some ideas for just how I come up with ideas in general. But I had a question that we could start with just to think about this as we build the world. And, full disclosure, we're not going to finish building today. So we're going to keep coming back.
Yeah, for sure.
Building our world as we go. So my question is, what are some ways as DMs we can build this dynamism into our campaign worlds? So worlds plural. So just when we're world building, whether it's Faerun, you're playing like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, or you're building a completely homebrew thing. How can we build it into our campaign worlds, Ian?
Well, you definitely want... you'd want things to kind of really happen with or without the players. So the movement is going to happen regardless. Now, where the players would be in relation to that movement is really up to them.
Right.
So you'd almost want to create something that's going on currently, or a I don't know. I mean, it could be anything. That, like I said, regardless of player involvement, things are going to start changing within the world because of this thing that's happening.
Right.
And that would create a dynamic movement in your world.
Right.
And I mean, it could be anywhere from a big thing, or it could start small. You know, if you want it to be, you could have it like be like I almost think like my brain's going to like Warcraft stuff, but like a blight that starts.
Right. Some kind of like world event or plague.
Right. Like it's really starts slow. Like it's just some of the crops. I'm also kind of thinking along the lines of like Interstellar, how like the stuff's all like decaying and getting all gross.
The world's turned into like a dust bowl.
Yeah, and like the
yeah.
crops are starting to die. So it'd almost be this simple thing that people aren't really paying attention too much to.
Right.
But it's almost like you hear rumors is what you could start that with. Just, you know, I mean, as far as creating something dynamic.
Yeah, I like that. I think, too, some ways you could, if you're not exactly sure, if you don't have a specific idea in mind, I mean, make some random tables. Like,
oh, yeah. Roll them tables.
The DMG has some good stuff for, like, here's some different events that you could do. Like, what if, like, you have some kind of fantasy army like the Mongol army that comes out, like, some place you haven't mapped out. You have, like, this womb of nations, and there's creatures coming out of there. The PCs maybe they're not involved with this incurring army directly, but how does that affect where they are? Like what little trickle down effects are happening? Or what if you have what if the weather is changing or the seasons even?
Right.
Like if they start a campaign in the fall, if you track the time, suddenly winter comes around and that's not something the players have control over, but it starts to snow and that affects, you know, if they're going out into the wilderness, it's going to affect the way they travel and those kind of things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, as players, really love that kind of thing. Anything to really pull people more into the world. I think lots of people really love those kind of subtle details.
Yeah.
That change, you know, just like you said, there's little season changes or you could even say like the army, or there's a war going on somewhere on the world, and like what resources is that pulling from all across, like everything.
Right. Like you think World War I or II, like a bunch of countries have to go into rationing. Like even the U.S., all the extra stuff gets pulled away, so your PCs are in a little town and they can't get the normal supplies.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Haven't you heard there's a war on? What do you guys?
Yeah,
where
do you think where do you think we send all of our swords right now? We don't have swords right now.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, my sword's broken. Well,
it's too bad.
That sucks. You have to figure something out, huh?
I think part of that is getting the feeling. This is a little. It's going to sound weird on the face of it, but the fact that the world doesn't care about your character. It's not there for your character. That's at least the feeling or the simulation is like it's going on with or without you.
Right.
You know.
And again,
go ahead.
This is just a thing to do if you're wanting to add more color to your world. If you don't need any of that, by all means, don't put it. Like
you do need it,
but it definitely creates a lot of fun.
It does
for the players.
Yeah. Definitely. So, let's build a campaign world with that in mind.
I just did. I'm done. Did you hear it? Yeah.
You need to do it again.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll do it again.
Okay.
Ready?
I'm ready.
How are we starting though? Are we wanting to create this dynamic world, or we want to like start with like where are we at as far as like high magic type thing, or what is that one that you love?
Grimdark.
That's it.
So yeah, I mean, you could start with genre. The thing that I like to do is just any kind of cool concept, like whether it's big or small, like something to get my brain like, ooh, that's interesting. Okay, what else can we add to that? What does that world look like? Like, for instance, maybe the concept is Schedule 1 magic. Like, magic is highly, highly feared. It's like heroin or something, where if you're just using magic openly, you're going to get arrested at the very least, unless you have some kind of special dispensation. So what does a campaign world look like where you just make that change? It's Faerun, but magic is illegal in the general sense. If you're like a humanoid living in a city, if you're out like in the wilds, like there's magic all over the place. So what does that look like? What changes?
Oh, I bet a lot of things would change.
Yeah.
Appearances would change.
Mm-hmm.
The way people dress would change.
Would there be some kind of organization that oversees the use of magic, and like kind of like in Harry Potter, how there's the Ministry of Magic, that they know if you cast a spell and you're underage, for instance, like they're watching you.
Right.
So would there be some kind of organization in place?
When you first started talking about it, I imagine there being like kind of like a higher authority that is this magic council, that if you're out there casting magic without the proper, whatever you want to call certifications or whatever,
official dispensation,
they have like a whole force of people that go after you. So like,
right.
That's, they can't, I would almost say that they can't like exactly pinpoint it, but they get, just like anything, magic does things to the area around it, or it influences things a little bit by pulling the energies, so they could get areas where it's happening and then have to go investigate.
Right. Right.
So I mean, it could be that. What would you even call that? The order, the magisterium?
I mean, I would just my thing, because this sounds dark, it sounds like imposing or tyrannical, is like the magisterial inquisition, like something where it's like you as a person, they don't care about you. They only care if you, like, it's lawful, maybe lawful neutral, where these are the rules. If you break them, you're going to get punished.
Oh yeah,
we don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, my mind is like, that's really cool. What if your characters, your PCs, are the agents who go out and take care of the illegal magic users?
Oh, that's scary. You just made it all insane.
Yeah, I made it all weird. Yeah. That's where my mind goes, is like, that seems like you can add in some moral quandaries that way, especially if it's just a lawful organization.
Right. Show up and there's just craziness and make them decide things. Oh, that's brutal.
And what if the magic, like, maybe the PCs, since that's a natural way for them to have a group, is like they're like these official inquisitors or whatever you want to call them. But maybe magic outside of this, maybe you actually have a chance of being possessed by demons. Like, all magic is like demonic or something. Like there is a bad influence. There's some curse happened, so you take Faerun, and all the mages came together and they made this thing because something happened 100 years ago or something, Yeah,
it almost like cursed all magic, what would you want it, like not like a spell plague, but
maybe it's from the what do they call it, the Demon Wars? It's the demons and the devils. They have this ongoing war.
Oh, you're talking about the Blood War, I think.
The Blood War. There you go.
Right.
Maybe it's related to that. Like, there was some, like, that it wasn't really like an evil force trying to, like, take out the world. We're just going to use Faerun because why not?
Because it's what we know.
That's what we know. That's what we play in. And so maybe something happened in the Blood War, and as a result, it infected or tainted magic on the prime material.
Right, and that's why. Oh, that's this whole idea of it, like using magic can draw demons into you or whatever.
Yeah.
However you want to, when you get that narrowed down, that's why they have this like whole force, because they don't, like, the demons coming into the world and they just wreck everything. They cause a bunch of chaos, so it's like a whole issue.
Or they possess people, like the people who use it start turning You could easily steal from like Symbaroum or something, where when you cast magic, you get this temporary corruption if you pass a limit in a given scene.
Well, would the players have like? Would they be able to use magic?
Yeah, because they would have dispensations, so they would have some kind of magic item that makes them at least partially immune, so that they can use magic. There's an incentive to use magic more. But if they go over a certain limit, they're not like completely immune, but they have a special way around it. But if they use it too much, or if that breaks, or it gets stolen, then they're like everybody else. But yeah, it probably make some kind of stat that's just for like a corruption type stat.
Right.
And so you have a threshold if you go over that. And again, I like it builds really good tension from what I played in Symbaroum, where you have a temporary corruption. So if you use magic, you have this temporary corruption just for the scene. So if you don't go over that threshold in that scene, once it's done, you've moved on to something else, it goes away. So you kind of have this resource management tension every scene. And then if you go over that, you can gain on more permanent stuff. And if you get too much permanent stuff, your form starts to change. Like if it's demon magic, your eyes go all black. Or
as you go up in level, does your temporary corruption increase?
You would probably have to work that out. You might be able to make it like any other stat, or maybe it goes up just as you level up. I'm not sure. Probably have to play test it and see what feels balanced. In terms of like balance, to me is like there's enough tension that the player is a little bit stressed about it.
Right.
Like, crap! If it's too easy, then it's just like.
Yeah, no one
You're
cares.
just going to feel there's no investment,
Right. There's no reason to learn anything if it's not hard. There's no challenge. It shouldn't be hard, but it's meaningful.
It's meaningful risk.
Right.
Like it's something that matters to their character and how they go throughout the world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that feels like a really cool, like I actually want to play that now. Like that's not a ton of campaign world information, but it's one change that's distinct enough that I'm like, ooh, I have a bunch of ideas now. So I would think that in my mind, it's like, okay, well, all the head mages got together and formed this organization, and they're probably a big world power. They're probably something akin to the Roman Catholic Church. Because in Faerun, for instance, they're all city-states. There's no government that rules over a whole area.
I wouldn't even say these people rule either, because they don't rule, but they're feared and respected by everybody. They're not like in charge, but everybody knows that they're in charge without actually.
Right. What if it's like, like you have Italy where you have the heads of the city-states, you have the rulers, you have the kings, but then you have the Pope. So what if you have a magus that's like the Pope, but it's not religious, it has to do with controlling magical power.
Right.
So it's like you have the ruler, but you could have some weird tension there too. But the thing is, it's a Pope who can actually he's probably the most powerful magus or wizard, so he's bad news if he's not kindly towards other people. That's scary. Scary.
And since he keeps using magic, might be scary. Like, man, he might get possessed by the demon.
What if he's already possessed by the demon?
That's what I'm saying.
He's the big bad for the campaign. That's like that. They don't know it, but Well, now you ruined it. They work for him, and they have to actually come back at the end of the campaign and fight the head magister.
I think that.
See that? Boom. We did it.
Boom. We made it and ruined it.
We didn't ruin it. What are you talking about?
What if we were gonna play it and like do it? Now we can't.
Oh well, you just change the big bad and then you're fine.
And the big bad's gonna be one of the players now.
Yeah, players aren't allowed to listen to this. For DMs only. If you play in our campaigns, you don't get to listen to this stuff.
Yeah, we can stop them.
You're fired. Yeah. So. If you had to build a session 1 for this campaign world just with what we have, what would you do? Where would you start it?
I would have them. I would have it start out with being them waking up and going to quote unquote work, however that looks, and then being sent out to go check out somebody using some low level magic that shouldn't be, probably within the city pretty close, since it'd be a low level situation.
So what city would they be in? Would you do like a homebrew city that's kind of like the headquarters of the Inquisition?
There's a part of me that would want to say, to start the characters, they're not like in the main area, like they're just out in some almost backwater town
Outpost.
as just the group that does that out there, and they get a message
Right.
to go check out something, that's local to them.
Right.
And then they go and check it out, and kabam, kabam, there's your first encounter.
Kabam, kablam. I like that. I think I would put the spin on it that I don't know how many people do this because I just came up with it on my own, but I'm not saying that it's original. But I do what's called character sessions. So before you start the campaign, you do solo sessions with each player to kind of get them into their character.
Right.
And I found it makes everything much better in terms of when you actually do your first full session. But my character sessions would be them going through the Inquisition boot camp. And
that'd be a good way.
First session is like their first day on the job, like they've been sent to this outpost, they're peons, like small fry in the organization. And this is like their first time going to take care of something like new police officers.
Right. That's how I'm imagining it.
Yeah.
Like police academy.
Police academy.
They're like out of it now, and this is their first job.
Right.
They're all together now. They're out of the thing. That's good. I like it.
Yeah. And then my mind is like, okay, well, how can I take their, like, if they have a necklace, if that's what keeps them immune, how can I take those away?
Of course, you're going to do that.
My job
Session
is going to be
one?
like, let's just, well, not session one, but start working on, like, how can I make that feel threatened for the players? But yeah, I think that's good.
Then you'd have to establish, can you get a new one? Can you make a new one?
I would think so, but I bet there would be some kind of thing, kind of like in the Army, like if you lose your gun, for instance, if you lose the stuff that the organization has given you, it's a big deal. Like, you can get in big trouble for it. So you're responsible for your own gear. You can get it replaced, but if you keep losing it, there's going to be penalties, I would think.
Penalties, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I love the idea, though, of it, like, the players being these, for lack of a better word, police officers of this magic. And as they go through the campaign further and further, they start to basically discover that they're the ones, like, they're the bad guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they're the oppressors and don't know it until something happens in game where you would, like, show that to them in different ways, but not like shove it in their face, but give them these subtle little things where they have to, like, discover, holy shit, what if we're on the wrong side of this whole situation?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it'd be interesting because there really is a problem with magic, but maybe the Inquisition is actually fostering it, making it worse.
Right.
Making a bad problem worse. And so you realize, especially if you kind of planned out what the plot was, you could start planting seeds early for them to be like, that's weird. I feel really weird about our job. Like,
and that also goes to that thing that we were talking about, creating the dynamic world. You set up things that are happening within that organization,
right?
That regardless of what is going on with the players, they may ignore the organization the whole time, but there's still things happening, and maybe they go to report in, and a bunch of people that they normally know aren't there anymore or something.
Right. Well, depending what is the... Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was like, just depending on the time frames, just ideas.
So what is the big bad's overall objective?
Oh, to rule everything.
But see, that's boring.
I know, but the whole thing's boring.
No, but it's actually interesting. Like, what if, like, I mean, maybe he's a demon, or I can't remember which one is which. I think the demons are chaotic evil, and the devils are lawful evil.
That's
something like that.
I think
It's
the
one or the
devils-
other.
Right. I think the devils are the crazy ones
They're the
that are chaotic, and the demons
Right.
are the ones that are
lawful.
lawful in the sense that they abide rules. Like,
Right.
I think.
So here's my thing: is I'm gonna make the big bad. I'm gonna make it Elminster is gonna be the big bad. So he's
That's
the Pope, and
the new one.
he's
the
the
High.
head of everything. Yeah, and you could make it like years in the future, but you make he's a high level caster, so he can keep living. He has ways to extend his life.
What is that line from Star Wars?
I don't know.
There are many paths. I don't remember. It's what Darth Sidious.
That's profound.
You know what he says. I forget.
It depends. Are you talking about from like episode 3?
I think it's from an episode. Yeah, it's episode 3 where.
See, I've seen episode 3 like 2 times.
Yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times. I'm drawing a blank though. He even says it in Rise of Skywalker. No. Yeah.
Darth Sidious
Yeah.
or Darth Plagueis?
So.
Are you talking about Darth Sidious or Darth
Yeah.
Plagueis?
Darth Sidious.
But because isn't Palpatine is Darth Sidious, right?
That's what I thought. I could be wrong.
I think what you're talking about is
Embarrassing
when he's quoting Plagueis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what it is. We have Google. Let's find out.
But it still doesn't establish what the big bad's goal. Like, what's his goal? To suck the life force from the planet and fly away.
Maybe. It seems like it'd be more interesting. Like, that's one place where, for me, I would want to make it a little more interesting or a little different than your typical villain stuff. But that, like, just taking over the world, like, it's been done so many times, so I personally get bored.
Right.
So if I'm bored, I'm not going to want to work on it. You know what I mean?
Right. But the thing I think of is, like, not every player has got to experience that game yet. Some people haven't played that yet, and it's like, well,
here's the quote. You ready?
yeah.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
That's good. I like it. That's our big bad right there. That's his
big bad,
live
yeah.
forever thing.
But I think the thing is the villain motivation isn't necessarily something the players have to know.
Well, right. It's just
Like,
a creative
that's just
dynamic.
that's like what he's doing. That's his reason for me being interested, essentially. Like, why I want to work on this character is because of who they are and why they're doing what they're doing, and the fact that you can play it against the grain, because that's and then from the player's perspective, as we know, it's not going to make much of a difference. It's still going to seem like, well, this person's a dick and they're trying to take over the world.
Right.
So.
He wants to be a bank robber.
A bank robber.
Yes.
So, I think that's a good place that's a good chunk, and now we can kind of think about it, and then next episode we'll build on to it. Because I'm thinking, like, my thing would be like, well, I'm going to build a special, even if they're not going there yet, I'm going to build like an Inquisitor city. So where would that be? And like, again, has things in the geography of Faerun changed at all? Or like the weather?
Well, how long has it been since? I mean, what are we?
I don't know.
Is relative.
My thinking is maybe 100 years from like the official canonized stuff. Currently, the current date is like 1580 DR, somewhere around there, 1590, in like the modules.
Right.
So maybe like 1690.
I can't
it's
imagine the
meaningless, but it's
landscape.
like some time has passed since all the official modules
Right.
were
If you'd want the
released.
landscape to change much, it'd have to be quite a bit further.
Oh, I mean, if it's natural, yeah, but not if it's
Right.
magical.
Yeah.
Like
well,
again, like maybe the day magic was infected, like a bunch of shit went, like things really went wrong. So like maybe the organization
cracked
was,
the planet,
yeah.
and now there's a
Cracked the
scar that
planet.
runs up the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've had like Toril, and there's the other world that's like a twin to Toril, which is the actual world of Faerun.
Yeah, it's the.
But it'll pop in and out of existence. What if part of Faerun, like a good sized chunk of it, what if it just blinks out of normal reality and it's somewhere else? So like this, because of whatever happened to magic, this chunk of reality got blinked into some kind of nightmare pocket dimension where everything's wrong, and it's
I
been
hope-
there for.
I hope people aren't there. That
There's
sounds
people there.
shitty.
That's where the PCs are.
Oh, they're in the weird place.
Yeah, and maybe
Oh,
it's
okay.
like maybe it's kind of like a Gnostic thing where Elminster is like the demiurge. He's like the evil demon keeping this piece of Faerun entrapped, so it's imprisoned. And so that's the thing, is revealing the plot of like, oh, we're actually like in this magical prison, like a piece of Faerun was taken somewhere else, and we've got to defeat the big bad to solve the issue, to get back.
This feels like you're preaching to me.
I am preaching to you.
I'm just kidding.
Are you convinced?
I'm converting now. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful start then to a glorious campaign.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, I think
want-
that's a good place to end our first episode.
Oh, we're gonna stop now, right? Well, I'm gonna
We
say
don't have to stop if you want to talk more.
no. I'm done.
Speak your beautiful words, brother.
I got no more. I'm done.
You got to send us off though.
Stay sweaty.
Stay sweaty, and stay sweaty, listeners. Stay sweaty. This has been a Polymuse creative production. Music was provided by Jerry Stenquist. To check his music out, go to soundcloud.com/Jerry-Stenquist. Until next time, roll high and take a point of inspiration. Like, share, subscribe.